tale behind Gucci is extraordinary. There are numerous rumors floating about. It has passion, family, love, and a great deal of tragedy. Even murder is an option. It's better to cry in a Rolls Royce than to be happy on a bicycle. That tale is what drives the attractiveness, intrigue, and, yes, sex element of a brand like Gucci. The success was incredible. It is difficult to overstate how successful the Gucci brand has been throughout history and continues to be now. We're talking about a brand worth around $18.5 billion, which is supported by a massive social media following. So you have this corporate value as well as this dynamism in the digital realm. That combination has been crucial to Gucci's success. There has been an unfairness in giving a lot of credit to those who did not deserve it all. Instead, people who deserved to be recognized were completely overlooked. Nobody has paid attention to the genuine story. Everyone has been fixated on the fairy tale. That's great news for viewers and possibly the media, but it's not the case. When it comes to family generations, there is an epic saying in Italy that the first generation creates, the second generation extends, and the third generation destroys. That's virtually exactly what happened in the Gucci story. Guccio Gucci was the company's founder. He had the concept to create high-quality leather items and market them to American tourists and other European travelers at first. Then there are his two sons, Rodolfo and Aldo. They ended up owning 50% of the corporation. And, in particular, Aldo was the marketer and expander, with a goal to promote Gucci outside the borders of Italy. Then there's the third generation, which is also where a lot of the issues began, because Aldo's three sons, Roberto, Giorgio, and Paolo, each had 50% with their father. Then there's Maurizio, a single child who inherited 50% of his father Rodolfo's estate. Family disagreements. The family feuds dominated the Gucci story, and they were exceedingly litigious. As a result, all of these brawls spilled into open court and became incredibly visible. Domenico, who began as Rodolfo's lawyer in the early 1980s, had one of the characters with the longest arcs and almost the most understanding of the plot. Domenico stated that it was quite complicated because of what was going at the time. There was certainly a lot of tension in the household because Aldo's children were upset that their father had done an outstanding job, which is correct. Aldo was a formidable individual, but they believed they deserved more than a quarter of the credit. So they had a lot of battles that lasted a long period. However, the situation was virtually confirmed, and there was no change in shareholder control, with Maurizio retaining his 50% stake. That was the circumstance, but it caused a lot of anger and a lot of battles. So the key turning point in our family saga occurred in 1983, when Rodolfo became very ill and died. He also left his only son, Maurizio, a 50% share in the company. Even back then, Maurizio had ideas about how he wanted to clean up the Gucci brand and promote it, but he can't get his uncle and cousins on board. They're overjoyed with all of the lucrative licensing arrangements that have proven to be quite profitable for them. As Maurizio grows increasingly persuaded of his vision for Gucci and that he is the one who must carry it forward, he is also at odds with his wife Patrizia, who has been pushing him to be the kind of Mr. Gucci and one of the leading luxury CEOs in Milan. But he's starting to feel pushed, so he decides to leave her in 1985. Tax evasion. At the same time, Paolo was ratting on his father, Aldo, to US IRS authorities because he suspected his father of siphoning profits and depositing them in offshore accounts. So the IRS opened a case, and the investigation resulted in Aldo being imprisoned. Domenico recalls a Gucci America board meeting where Maurizio stated, "You have to explain what this means." Domenico explained to family members that this is the United States, and it's really serious. Tax evasion is a big problem, Domenico told the board members. You're pessimistic, they said, and he replied, oh, maybe. I'm not sure what you want me to say. Unfortunately, Aldo did go to jail, which was a huge change in Domenico's life because he went from being the company and family's lawyer to running Gucci America with the explicit objective of settling with the IRS. The Gucci reputation was still very good, and most importantly, they had global name recognition. They opened stores in places like Japan and Asia. They were very great early on in all of these regions. But there was a problem. Domenico believed the product was becoming less appealing, and they had substantially increased distribution. So there were a lot of incidents that occurred. The Covert Campaign. Andrea Moronti recalls vividly, as if it were yesterday, when he explained to the other members in the Morgan Stanley room that he had met with Maurizio Gucci and that he wanted to do some form of shareholding restructuring. Andrea never forgets that the first time he described a transaction, everybody was interested, and that's the first time he understood the power of a brand. He didn't have enough money to buy everything himself, but the intricacy of acquiring the cousins and also the uncle had one option. Because Andrea spent a lot of time with Maurizio, Maurizio gave all the inside information of what everyone within the family, and in particular, he explained how Paolo Gucci had been ill-treated by his father and given a significantly reduced number of shares with his brothers because Paolo literally took his father to jail. So what Andrea Moronti did was propose to him that he be paid a very similar amount of money as if he had not been penalized by his father. I'll pay you the same price that your brothers are going to be receiving. He accepted. So he actually went there with a suitcase of cash and purchased this initial 3% from Paolo Gucci, which actually changed the life of Gucci. When they realized the game was over and someone else was coming to run the business, they gradually sold their shares one by one, making what had seemed like an impossible mission a reality. InvestCorp eventually purchased 50% of all available shares, and at that point, InvestCorp and Maurizio owned the company. Management oversight. So Maurizio emerges as the CEO. He had control because, despite the fact that he was in a 50-by-50 agreement with InvestCorp, they gave him management control. His vision was to take Gucci back up market, which meant quality products, beautiful workmanship, and a very classic idea of what he wanted Gucci to be. He used to say he wanted Gucci to be round and brown and soft to a woman's hand. There was no money spared, including rare antiques and craftsmanship. So the debt piled up quickly, and at the same time he had cut out the most profitable parts of the business, such as the Gucci accessories collection, which was the company's cash cow. Things were done somewhat irrationally. He incurred massive costs in Italy that the company could not afford at the time, and he decided to start all new products. The economic crisis. As a result, Gucci's financial situation deteriorated, and they were unable to pay salaries. They were unable to pay suppliers, and they were on the edge of having to take the firm's books to court to declare that they were unable to settle the bills, which would imply that the company had declared bankruptcy. Maurizio had the correct things, but he couldn't make them happen. Some people have amazing vision, but he had the finest vision, the best approach, but he was completely incapable of executing. So, InvestCorp, after giving Maurizio complete rein to implement his idea, they're becoming increasingly concerned about the situation, and they're millions of dollars in the hole. So they decided not to put any more money in because they believe it'll just go down the drain. The new CEO. To protect and sustain the strong relationship Maurizio had with InvestCorp, it was in his best advantage to go to InvestCorp and say, let's choose a common new chief executive officer, somebody who's really gonna operate the business. Unfortunately, the decision to remove him was made for his own best interests, but sometimes your own interests are interpreted differently. He begged them for more time. According to his view, the turnaround requires a bit more time for the customers to really get a sense of how Gucci has evolved. He begs them, "If you just give me 6 months." He continues, "The Japanese market will realize that there's a new Gucci and the wind will be back in our sails." Well, he never got that chance. InvestCorp set up a war room and went after him with everything they could. Finally, they were successful in kicking him out, and they bought his 50% stake in the company for $150 million and then took it over entirely. The irony of this story was that Maurizio was correct. The Japanese became aware of the new Gucci and began purchasing Gucci bags, and the corporation began producing money like crazy in a very short period of time. Murder. In March of 1995, when Maurizio walks into the front entrance of his new offices in broad daylight, a gunman enters the entryway behind him and shoots him dead in cold blood. The murder of Gucci was a startling occurrence for the city, and it was also quite dark because there was no clear culprit. The prosecutor who was investigating the case looked into his business dealings and family issues. He examined the cousins. He interrogated Patrizia, but he didn't detect a clear family connection, and the case went cold for 2 years until, thanks to a tip, the police raided Patrizia's flat on Corso Venezia at 5:30 am and charged her with Maurizio's murder. She had an obsession. She wanted her spouse dead and told everyone about it. People are frequently remembered for the wrong reasons, such as glamour and possibly fascination. There is a chance that Maurizio will be remembered as someone who was slain by his wife for no reason at all, or for very good reasons, depending on your point of view. But, in my opinion, Maurizio's true legacy is that the Gucci brand was truly founded by 3 generations, as is common in several family enterprises. The family is unable to maintain control of the company after the 3rd generation. Maurizio not only lost control of the company in this case, but he also lost his life. Tom Ford. So, even if Maurizio was eventually unsuccessful in implementing his goal, he had actually done a lot of the groundwork for Gucci's following phase. He hired Dawn Mello, the president of Bergdorf Goodman at the time, and one of her big accomplishments was to hire Tom Ford. Tom was informed in a meeting, "We think you can really fix this company. We're not interested in interfering, and we don't pretend to be creative in any way, so you're in charge," which he agreed, and that's basically the start of the story. It's difficult to overstate Tom Ford's impact on Gucci, with his extraordinary style, innovation, and actually his sense of control. This is one of the really key success criteria. There has to be a vision, and it has to be a very direct vision. Tom Ford has a very clear and strong idea about what Gucci could be. In terms of global amusement, he ensured that his vision was completely controlled throughout the consumer experience. Ford's design strength hit the fashion world like a tidal wave, from advertising to every point of communication, product detail, and so on. Actually, something had shifted at Gucci. Since Dom's design in Florence, there was a new Gucci in the air, and sales took off immediately. And even though they were showing more sexy styles on the runway, they were still selling primarily black and brown handbags. But they really had lit a fire under this brand, and the sales are doubling. So the sales went through the roof. In 1995, the sales doubled. The success was just unbelievable. IPO. InvestCorp discovered that there was no fashion sector in the financial market. As a result, they had to teach analysts on how the premium market functioned. Domenico began giving presentation seminars, bringing analysts into the room and beginning to talk about how the business works. They truly pioneered the luxury sector in the financial market, and other brands followed suit. But it was the Gucci IPO that really set the tone. On Wall Street, the old Gucci moniker is certainly drawing a lot of customers these days. Gucci's IPO was much more successful than they could have imagined. They started at $22 and quickly rose to $26. And the sale was 14 times oversubscribed. It proved to be a success story, certainly from a financial perspective, for InvestCorp, but also a huge success story within the industry. Sales were up 113%, so they were delighted. It was the 5th quarter in a row with which they doubled their sales. Once it was clear that the luxury market was there to be developed and exploited, all the players who were already in that market had the competitive advantage of having seen it from within. The risk was that someone could take it over. And given this massive success in the financial market, it doesn't matter how successful you are, there are always moments when the stock may go down. Japan was the leading force in the luxury industry at the time, so when there was this Asian crisis, the stock fell, and Domenico believed that was when LVMH began purchasing shares of the firm, which was his main fear about the likelihood of a takeover. Rivals. As a result, Gucci's true market adversary was LVMH and Bernardino, who was recognized in the European luxury market as a corporate raider. He had acquired Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, and other fashion businesses, as well as Dior. The owners of LVMH attempted to develop a significant corporation with their members based on one criterion: the highest quality and most elitist product in every line that they sell around the world. Domenico received a call from Yves Cossel, the CEO of Louis Vuitton, saying that LVMH was interested in taking over. At the time, if you exceeded the 5% level, you had to go public, according to New York Stock Exchange rules. So that was the start of the war with LVMH. From January to June, two retail titans compete for control of fashion's biggest prize, the House of Gucci. So, after Bernard threw down the gauntlet for Gucci, Domenico di Sole realized he was in for a fight, and he enlisted the help of bankers and consultants, and determined to launch a resistance. His major concern being that he did not want Bernard to be able to seize control of the company without making a full and fair offer to all shareholders. They are our main competition. We compete with them for clients. We compete for talented people. This is a case of creeping control. They want to control the company without paying the full price. With the help of his advisors, Di Sole put a protection mechanism in place through the issuing of employee shares, which kept on diluting Bernard's stake as he was building up his stake in the company. So, in the 9th hour, François Pinault, who runs PPR, a French retail group, comes in and offers to buy a stake in Gucci, becoming the White Knight to help them fight Bernard. Francois was the most decisive man in the history of the universe. He drove a hard bargain, securing $3 billion for Gucci's immediate growth, which Bernard rejected. So Francois Pinault had an even bigger idea, and he gave Yves Saint Laurent $3 billion to Tom and Domenico, saying, "I want you to be the dream team of fashion, to buy up other brands, and turn Gucci into a multi-brand group that can rival Bernard and LVMH." That was pretty brutal because they were under pressure to do it. And every time they tried to buy something, all of a sudden, LVMH interfered. Other brands, Tom and Domenico had to turn around Gucci, but also to uncover other talent, other brands, and help them succeed. It became a massive undertaking, and they were both working around the clock. They invested in Alexander McQueen, Stella McCartney, and other high-end brands. Some were fresh designers who required assistance in growing and maturing, while others were faded names that needed to be revitalized. There was an agreement that they would run the company independently for 5 years, creating this multi-brand corporation, this vast collection of enterprises, and then Francois Pinault would buy 100% of the shares at the price agreed upon during the dispute with LVMH. So, 5 years after the initial White Knight, Pinault acquires 100% ownership of Gucci, and Tom and Domenico are in a position where they are effectively running the show. They treat a publicly traded corporation as though it were their own, until a time comes when Pinault takes control and it's time to renegotiate the contracts for Tom and Domenico, and they realize they won't have the freedom to run Gucci the way they used to. And Tom and Domenico announced their resignation from Gucci, which was a surprise to the industry at the time. Conclusion. So, in the end, Tom was clear that they were not going to stay and that they had done their part, and it was time to move on. The partnership between Tom and Domenico became foundational, not only for the Gucci business, but for other luxury houses that were beginning to replicate the synergy between the creative and the management. It was seen as a necessary component in order to function at the time. Gucci's genius, in many ways, has been how it has been able to reinvent itself. When we think about how Gucci was rescued in the 1990s, sex sells, and that current outlook on sex was a profoundly crucial part of that. Now we've seen Gucci truly surge ahead again, with tremendous success in the last few years. What's the deal with that? Actually, they've expressed sex in a rather different way. A gender-blending sex, a non-binary type of sex that has really resonated with millennials and consumers under the age of 35, and that has been both very unusual and very challenging for luxury brands. But, of course, Gucci has made it a true runway success.